everyone, and welcome to the Live for Five, powered by Camelback Ventures. I am your host, Kelli Saulny, Director of Strategic Partnerships for Camelback. Those of you who may be new to the Camelback fam, Camelback Ventures is a national nonprofit accelerator based in New Orleans, but we are national. Our mission is to increase access to opportunity and capital for entrepreneurs of color and women through direct investment in their companies and advocating for fairness in their funding. I'm really excited about our guest today, Ms. Lanette Dailey-Reese, founder and executive director of CapXLab and esteemed 2020 Camelback alum. So welcome, Lanette. Lanette, before we get started, why don't you just introduce yourself to the audience and share more about the CapXLab?
For sure. CapXLab has been around since 2017, and we've been working in DC with students and teachers and families to design immersive school experience for middle school students. We live in one of the country's largest resources as it relates to museums, cultural centers, research centers, the political base of this country and of the world. And so we see if there's any other place where we can have, where the city is the classroom, it's Washington, DC. It also helps that it doesn't cost a thing to do all of these experiences and be in all these wonderful places with these great educators, not just in school spaces, but in those cultural resources as well. And so for us, we took a robust curriculum and said, how do we turn it inside out and go outside and put it to the test with the resources matched in the city? And so over the last 5 years, we've worked with students and teachers to say, as an educator, I love the museums. I love going. People come to visit. They love to go. But if kids don't like it, then it's not really worth the work to really design. And so when kids said they really enjoy being outside and not sitting in the classroom every day and going to see places and spaces that are historically just places they've been kind of field tripped through, no time to really stop and learn, no time to really ask questions, we decided we wanted to disrupt that process and say, listen, we can go to the National Archives and we can go to the National Portrait Gallery and spend time and talk to the educators who created those spaces. And how does it inform who you are as a young person so that you know you can go back here whenever you want to. You can come here after school with your friends. You can come on the weekend. If you see something on the metro stop, you're like, wait, I've been to that place before. I want to go see that. So it's about creating agency and belonging in a city where kids historically haven't had that.
I love that. And actually, that's a great segue because I wanted to give a framing because I do see some people who are new probably to Live to Five and maybe even Camelback. And I wanted to start with giving a framing as to why we even started Live for Five. So today is the first day of Black History Month. And it's also kind of our 1-year anniversary of our Generational Inheritance Initiative launch. So let me just talk a little bit about what the Generational Inheritance Initiative is. So basically, that initiative is something that we put forth at Camelback Ventures to emphasize the value of cooperative power and resources. It's really our aim, and it's the argument I've been making for a long time, to redirect the current focus of generational wealth, which has really been an output based on unequal wealth distribution, and places the responsibility of wealth creation on the individual. We want to reframe that conversation to a new framework that we call generational inheritance, which really focuses on the inputs that enables not only wealth accumulation, but also the equitable conditions needed to ensure BIPOC leaders and communities can thrive over generations. And just to offer a quick example of the difference or how we see generational inheritance playing out is, or the distinction I should say is, when we usually speak about generational wealth, what we're generally saying is something along the lines of something of monetary value in which like a great-grandparent passes something to the grandparent, to the parent, to the next child, and so on. But that's really an output based on individual success. And as we know, the reality is we have been excluded from wealth creation for many generations and still in a lot of ways even now are being excluded. And the wealth gap is widening because people of color, particularly Black people, or most specifically Black people, are still being marginalized, right? And as a result, the median wealth for Black Americans is expected to fall to zero by 2053. So we find that it's imperative to understand that if we don't pass along education and equitable conditions, no matter how much money we make, each generation is going to keep having to start over. So it's more about the sustainability that comes into wealth. So, and what we're inheriting, what every generation, or as we would say, the next in line is inheriting, um, um, as a means to generational wealth. So I'm just going to pause there, Lanette, before we go into the live for five, and just see if you had any thoughts about that, particularly around your work as it relates to history being the bridge from the past to the next in line, and how you see that playing a part in terms of what the narrative is even that you want the next in line to inherit.
For me, I think when we talk about what it means from a reflective standpoint, that's that history piece. It's not just, it's about one, understanding the models and representation of the traits and the values and what it means to pass things along when it comes to those inputs. So for me, one thing that's really important is this sense of community. And that's rooted not just in my work, but in how I see the world and how I engage personally and professionally. And so we talk about that historical piece. When you think about the civil rights movement and you think about any of the social consciousness movement that happened, LGBT rights, any of the Latinx movements, all of those pieces are rooted in a sense of those communities coming together. And so for me, it's like, how do we pass that sense of hard work and coming together, especially at a time in our country where we've been pushed to these kind of polar ends, or we are being expected to take these sides and these teams, and this kind of tribalistic approach to the world doesn't help when it comes to community building. And so we think about what it means to be that generational passing on is the absolutely critical importance of being in community, not just where you live, but also those extensions and those extended out spaces where you work, where you spend your time, how you spend your money, the people you engage with, and the networks that you build, I think are really important when you talk about that sustainability. It's about what are the actions, what are the models of those generational wealth traits and values that you want to see and seed and continue to give to the next in line.
I love that. I love that. So having said that, and now that you're kind of primed up, I got you kind of geared up and ready to go, let's jump into the live for five. The live for five is really simple. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, mostly around the principles around generational inheritance. And I may probe a little, but nothing nothing that will be unfamiliar to you for sure. So I'm just going to dive in with question 1, right? Which is, and we kind of just talked about this. Inheritance can take on various forms such as money, assets, values, or traits. Tell us about an asset or a trait you inherited from someone and how it made a positive impact on your life.
Well, I'm going to talk about a big group of someone's first, and then I'm going to narrow it in.
Okay.
So jumping into this world of social entrepreneurship and launching CapXLab is, in my mind, was my first time being an entrepreneur. And then I was going through the application part of Camelback. We have to do the videos. And so I was like, there was a video question about this sense of legacy. And the one thing that I realized is that I come from a strong line of entrepreneurs, men, women. My grandmother owned a record store and a hair salon. My aunt owned a cosmetic line. My cousin has an insurance agency. My aunt developed a community development group focused on Black wealth and economics in the community that we're from. And so once I started to realize that I come from a long line and a diverse group of entrepreneurs, then it made me realize, okay, I can do this work. I've seen it before. I just had to pause and go, I've seen this in action. And the most impactful person on me was my mother. So in high school, my mom opened a baby consignment shop in our neighborhood. We could walk to it. It was right at the corner of one of our blocks. And I watched my mother, who had worked really hard in the food industry. And she's like, I want to build something for myself, build something for my family. And it was all a full family effort. My mom, my dad, me and my sisters, like our friends participated in this idea of creating the sits of our own. And watching her go through that process of what it is to build inventory and develop capital. And for me to be able to, her to trust me to open the store on a Saturday morning as a part of my responsibility, and what it means to track inventory, like learning those skills are things that I just did and didn't realize that later down the line, it would come invaluable as I sit here today as a founder. But I also saw many of those people lose their businesses. So I know what it is to have the excitement and joys of creating something amazing, and also the pain and the challenges that come with trying to sustain. And I think that's what we're naming when we talk about that, those outputs not being sustainable, because there's some financial pieces that go along with that sustainability. And so I think having the sense of the long line and diverse group of folks in my life who have been entrepreneurs, and then to see my mother do it up close and be a part of that is something that was super impactful on how I'm able to stay in this work every day, on behalf of CapXLab.
No, I love that story. And, oftentimes people do share stories of their parents and their parents or someone, in their family or family members close to them. And I think it's so interesting whether you're an entrepreneur or not. Like I tell people, I grew up in a house, my mom was a nurse. She always wanted to be a nurse. My father was a teacher and a basketball coach. I say all that to say that, I grew up in a house where people loved what they did. Mm-hmm. And I didn't grow up in a house where people complained about going to work. And so I was just always conditioned into thinking that, that's what you do. You figure out what you love, and you figure out, how to do that for the rest of your life. And because, again, my mom was a nurse and my dad was a teacher, I consider those both professions where you are serving people, you are serving community. And so I really grew up thinking, you find a profession whether you love and you can serve people, and that's just what you do. No one had to tell me every day with a finger in my face,
Right.
I just picked up on it from what, just what I saw around me from my family. They had successful friends as well, but I just always think that's, I always like to highlight that you kind of touched upon this, how, you didn't really see yourself as an entrepreneur until you did until you started your business, your venture, but there was probably always something in you, you know what I'm saying, just from your grounding, from your roots, that was calling you to do this work. And that is because of who came before you and how you wanted to impact the next in line. So I just wanted to kind of raise that point. So thank you for sharing that story. Next question. So we're going to move to the first principle, which is around aspirational hope. So when I talk about generational inheritance, I always like to start with hope. I know a lot of people like to end with hope and, keep hope alive type speech. But I always like to start, with hope, because I personally feel that if you enter the conversation with hope, you're already in a design mode. That's kind of where your vision is for how you want to see impact, ultimately be executed. So how do you infuse aspirational hope into your daily work? And is there any routines that you would like to share?
So first of all, if you are an entrepreneur in any kind of aspect, you have to start with hope. There's no way you can get up every morning and do the grind that is entrepreneur building, designing work. So I think we come with a sense of hope about what the world we want to create, or the environment we want to create. And so when I saw that, I looked up what hope means. How does Webster define hope? And it's about defined expectations and desires. And in order for those expectations and desires to be realized, what are the things I have to do every day so that I wake up thinking about not just who I want to be as a leader, but how does that help CapX become the best thing when it launches in fall 22? And what does it mean for me to continue to do that growth around what are my expectations and desires as a leader, and what does it mean for CapX? And so the one thing I really focus on, and I always tell other entrepreneurs and other folks I come in contact with, it is about taking care of your mind and your space. How do you protect those things? Because I can't show up at my best self if I'm not in my best health, if I'm not in my best mental capacity, if I haven't spent time caring for my family, if I haven't spent time with my daughter, or, checking on my extended family. There are some inherent personal things that have to happen. So those are that's one piece of the routine for me. The other piece is spending time in community with other leaders, because this work can be very isolating. You feel like I'm only working on CapX and other people are only working on their ventures, and we're running and running and running. And so you begin to feel isolated. So the other thing, I check on a lot of my Camelback Fellows. I check on other folks I've been in fellowships with, because we can find ourselves head down doing the work, and then wait, I haven't talked to anybody in 2 or 3 days. And so there's a sense of checking on each other that's really important, and I find really valuable. For me, is checking on other leaders and other leaders checking on me as well. Also creating a sense of work-life balance. I have this constant at about 4 or 5 o'clock. I shut everything down and I'm focused on family, so that I can contribute and be involved and take care and engage, I can replenish myself. And at night, if I want to do like 3 more emails or get 3 more tasks done before I go to sleep, and that's my number 3. I'm only doing 3 things. So I pick the 3 most important things that doesn't take the most time. And then I can peacefully go to sleep without feeling like I didn't get anything done today. I haven't spent any time with my daughter and, colored with her or talked about her school day or spent time with my wife and asked about her business and what was going on. So I think there are moments where you have to shut it down so that you can be engaged in multiple spaces of your life, so that you can also give yourself the grace to know, I did CapEx work today. I worked on me. I checked on the people, but that's about the routines of it. And so those are some of the things that I do that keep me hopeful and keep me engaged in this work.
Yeah, I love the fact that you're raising this idea of mental wellness because in a lot of ways, I do feel like we're the first generation to really indulge as Black people in mental wellness, and it really excites me how open we're becoming more open. I wouldn't say we're quite there yet, but we're definitely becoming more open and vulnerable in terms of and protective of our mental wellness. And so thank you for raising that. As that is a part of the revolution, right? That is a part of the fight, which is protecting and valuing your mental wellness. So thank you for lifting that as well. And also, it's actually a good way to segue into the question 3, because you were talking about like this idea of you checking on your fellows because how isolating this work could feel. And question 3, which is the next principle of generational inheritance, is on connectivity. So the point of inheritance is really about linking legacies because it gives us the building blocks to design a better future. What are some values and or traits from previous generations you would like to see our generation hold on to and pass along to the next in line? And what, if any, are some values or traits you feel we should not pass along to the next in line?
Things we definitely have to do. I started with this around the sense of community. And it also ties into me sharing about how do we check on each other. So that's about that community building, not just, again, where you live, but in the networks and the relationships that you have. So that's absolutely essential. Then there's the other piece about learning happens everywhere. And I say that because, again, that we can often find ourselves very focused on things that affirm our beliefs, very focused on things that lift us up in ways that we only want to talk about. But you got to step into other circles and spaces to learn. So for me, learning happens everywhere. And how are you making yourself available and leaning into different spaces across, up, down, in different communities, places that you've never thought you'd find value? Like, how are we pushing ourselves to do that? I think is absolutely essential trait that we have to continue to pass on so that we can continue to learn. We always talk about this sense of equity and diversity and inclusion. That requires some work on our parts as individuals to step into those spaces that aren't familiar to us. And so how do we keep doing that so we can begin to continue to do that community building and bridge building? Yeah. One thing I would say we should not pass on is that the everything right now approach to life is exhausting and draining and it's false. And if you know anything about it, you said it, talking about your family and watching your mom be a nurse and your dad be an educator, that is hard work every day. Entrepreneurship, hard work every day. And so I think these ideas that if I do these 3 things, it'll happen right now. And if it doesn't, then it's a failure or it didn't work, so I'm not doing it. No, you got to keep pushing through. So those are the things that I think stand out most for me as traits.
Well, you have social media to thank with the instant gratification generation, with a microwave generation. And I get that answer a lot, to be honest. When I ask this question is, with the microwave generation, we think everything should happen immediately. It should happen once, and it should hapen in grand, in grand results. Yes. Because on social media, everybody is lit. So there's this perception that if it didn't make it to Instagram, if it's not social media worthy, then it's not worth it, and it didn't happen almost, right? Like,
it minimizes
like nobody said, like people don't understand everything that happened before you even got to that point. Exactly. So no, I totally hear you on that one. I want to shift gears, and even though what I'm about to ask you may seem like a obvious question in your line of work, I think I do want to spend time on it and kind of getting in the weeds. So the next principle of generational inheritance is it has to be rooted in anti-racism and anti-blackness.
For sure.
And I mean, listen, for the past few years, I'm not even gonna get into January 6th and all that, you know, like, but like,
for sure.
it's just more than evident that the biggest inheritance that we all receive, no matter, you know, black, white, and all things in between, living in America, is racism. How does your work dismantle white supremacy and advance racial equity? And how do you feel prepared for the moment that we're in now?
Well, the preparation I work on every day. That's not a finished approach for me. I'm reading right now, Begin Again, the James Baldwin expose written by Eddie Glaude Jr. Like that is the most, I've been talking to my wife for the last couple of days. Like that book is speaking to me and everybody should be reading it because it does two things. It explains what you're just saying. America is built on racism, full stop. But it also continues to fuel why I do my work. And so when I take kids and my team takes kids down to the National Mall and we're having conversation about Reconstruction and civil rights, we don't take them there because we want them to believe the story that's printed on the wall or what has been curated by the educator. We want them to interrogate, ask questions, push back, contribute something new. Like that is how we dismantle racism around the work that I do at CapXLab. It's like putting kids in the spaces so that they themselves can know you have a voice, you can read and articulate, you understand the world, and you don't have to wait till you grow up and become a grown-up to be able to contribute. You can contribute today as a 12-year-old because you're reading the news, you're on social media, you see what's happening, you have a voice. But I need to put you in the spaces where the racism is being documented and all of the past and all of the things that are happening in the current world. And then I need you to, what do you see? What do you feel? What does that mean to you? And because we start to empower them in that way to understand the systems of this country as young people. So if they're 12 at that point, by the time they're 17, and we've done that repeatedly in multiple different contexts across a curriculum, now you've empowered a group of people who can show up in spaces and ask the right questions and push the right buttons to change the system. They're not going to show up unknowing how the seat of democracy works or how the seat of the government works. I know who to go see and ask to move things, to get the policies changed, to get the bill passed, to advocate for what we want. And so for me, that is how we do it in our work every day, is putting students at very young ages in the spaces so that we empower them through their voice. And over time, our position is that we can begin to dismantle that racism.
I love that. Kudos to all of that. I don't even have a I don't even have a probing question for that one. That's a hard stop for me.
You gotta come see us.
No, I'm gonna make my way. It's a little too cold in DC now, but I'm gonna make my way
for sure
around March.
Okay.
All right, fifth and final question, which is based on the last principle, which is around perpetuity, right? So as a social innovator, what legacy do you hope to leave behind for the next in line?
Perseverance and agility.
Perseverance and what was that? I'm sorry.
Agility.
And agility. You wanna share why?
Perseverance is about being able to overcome the small challenges. When the small things knock you down, or when the big thing knocks you down, do you have the ability to get back up, and what does that mean for the next step? Being agile is being able to move and pivot and use your peripheral vision in a way that allows you to see the world in a larger context, and then make a move relative to that, and shift and grow and stretch. Like that for me is what being agile means. Because many of us walk in this world very rooted in what we believe and how we operate. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it doesn't allow you to be agile and see the world in a much more dimensional and complex, nuanced way. And so that's something I think is important.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I definitely see how that plays into perpetuity and sustainability. So thank you. That was really powerful. We are ready to close. Tell people how they could connect with you and learn more about your work.
Go to CapXLab.org on IG, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also drop into our website, CapXLab.org. You can see about our journey, our educators. You can see our students in action, some of the amazing places and the work that we've done across the city. If you have any questions, hit me up. I'm always open to talk and meet new people and have conversations about this work.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And for
Thank
any
you,
of
Kelli.
those who, no, thank you. If anybody, before you guys hang out, disconnect, if you're interested in learning more about Camelback's work and/or generational inheritance, you can always visit us at camelbackventures.org and/or camelbackventures.org/inheritance to learn more about generational inheritance. Lanette, you are amazing. Best of luck to you. Thank you for everything, and just continue being the leader that you are in every single way. We're honored to call you a Camelback Fellow. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Peace.
Happy Black History Month. Bye.